good there.
Check.
Alrighty, we're going to go ahead and begin this special meeting of the Board of Education. It is 5:30 exactly, and let's start, please. That's the call to order. Let's start. If we could all rise, gentlemen, take off any non-religious headwear. We're going to do the Pledge of Allegiance to the U.S. and New Mexico flags. So just a reminder, anyone who wants to sign up for public forum, if you can make sure to go ahead and do so. Next item on the agenda is the approval of the agenda. Entertain a motion or any comments?
I recommend that we go ahead and approve the agenda.
Second.
Any comments at all? No? All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? None. Let the record show, please, that board member Lorraine Price is not with us this evening. And as well, the next item then is the introduction of our interpreter tonight. Have at it.
President Carrillo, members of the board, Superintendent Garcia, my name is Carlos Martinez. I will be serving as translator this evening. I'll be seated in the rear of the auditorium if I'm needed. Presidente Carrillo, miembros de la Junta Directiva, Superintendente García, me llamo Carlos Martínez. Es mi placer servir como intérprete esta noche. Estaré sentado al fin del auditorio si me necesitan.
Thank you. Any other board announcements for this evening? All right, next item on the agenda is superintendent announcements.
I just have one. Board President Carrillo, members of the board. Out-of-state travel, ECO, there will be students will be attending the 2017-2018 Skills USA National Competition, June 25th through July 1st, in Louisville, Kentucky.
Excellent. They, just like our ROTC, they have been winning awards for their welding and auto body and everything else. Just, I mean, doesn't get a lot of press or anything, but they're just doing amazing stuff over there. So congratulations to
Mr. President.
Yes, sir.
Can somebody explain to me what the national competition is?
They mentioned it last time, board member Carrillo, but I think they'll be competing, and Mr. Gephardt or Ms. Singh, maybe you can help me. I think they're competing in welding and automotive and trades, correct? Yes.
And you have to go pretty high in state to get to nationals, so.
Because some of our students actually received like one of them got like a $10,000 scholarship as a prize for his welding, as I recall. So it's a big deal.
Any additional superintendent announcements? No. Okay. So this evening, the next item on the agenda is the abridged presentation. So to let the public know, this is a shorter version of the 94-slide presentation that was originally given to the board, I don't know, 6 weeks ago, maybe, a long time ago. And we felt very strongly that before making any decisions regarding this, that we wanted to give the public the opportunity, again, to see the information on which we're basing our decisions. And not having 3 more meetings with 94-slide presentations, but having an abridged presentation, and then posting the 94-slide presentation online. So that's why we're doing the presentation this evening. Things are out of order, a little more out of order than usual. We're going to do the public forum after that, so that if people, you know, obviously the presentation may inform what you may or may not want to say in public forum. And then we'll go on with the rest of the agenda that we have. We do have under action, making a decision about these items tonight relative to Chaparral, EJ, Turquoise Trail, and Nava. So there you have it. Okay. Yes, you may. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. President, members of the board. For those of you that weren't here last time, I do want to say something before our Chief Operations Officer presents this. This was a follow-up to last year. The board requested more in-depth information, more demographic information, and an update of the study that was done last year. What I want to make sure that people understand is that this presentation is based on facts, data, demographic information. It does not include anything about perception of the schools, how people feel about their schools. We know they're all three great schools with great faculty, great leadership, great community involvement, and that people love their schools and love their neighborhood schools. And so I want you to understand that the affective domain for educators, right, how we feel about things, is not part of this, but rather what is driving this is elementary seats. We have more of them than we have elementary students, and the age of the buildings. And how do we deal with that long term in being good stewards of the public funds when we go to taxpayers for GEO-bond, basically. And so that is what is driving this, not in any way meant to demean or to not recognize the passion and the feelings that people have for their neighborhood school. So with that said, I'd like to introduce our Chief Operations Officer, Ms. Wagner, who will give the presentation this evening. Thank you.
Good evening, Board President Carrillo, board members, Superintendent Garcia. This abridged presentation was a compilation of a study which we partnered with architectural research consultants to do. The purpose of the study was to answer some questions from the Board of Education, but I wanted to give credit to architectural research consultants and Mr. Romero, who isn't with us this evening, because they in fact do our facilities master plan. So they are very in tune with not only our district facilities, but our enrollment, our capacity, and our demographics district-wide. We've been working with them for over 20 years on our district boundaries, and in this case, we've been working with them on information about these 4 facilities, really, for the last 3 or 4 years. As Superintendent Garcia mentioned, the purpose of this study was to respond to a directive from the Board of Education, and we have a decision-making tree on the next slide that summarizes the requests from the Board of Education. So I'll just let everyone read this slide briefly before I move on. In January of 2018, the Board of Education asked the superintendent to study the facility issues related to some under-enrolled or declining enrolled schools in the center of Santa Fe. And this led to a decision-making tree that we've provided for the Board of Education so that now that you have this study, that you can work through these questions together and determine the action you'd like to take. The first decision that you'll be discussing, I believe, and trying to grapple with this evening is which school site should the district keep and rebuild. So we'll provide you with a brief summary of all the information surrounding the 3 facilities and what would make these feasible sites for future use as elementary schools. The second decision, which is the purview of the board, is what enrollment and assignment areas would be associated with any changes to the configuration of schools. So boundary changes would definitely become a part of the process, and we bring you some preliminary ideas this evening. The final question was born of a subsequent board directive requesting that the superintendent determine which of the 3 schools might be suitable for Turquoise Trail Charter School, whose lease will not be renewed in the coming years. In order to provide the information in a manner that would help to make decisions, we've studied these sites looking at all of the same factors. I'll let you look through them again. We've looked at preliminary enrollment boundaries. This would not be something that we'd bring to you in great detail till your first decision was made, but to give you an idea of how to solve the problem if the configuration of schools are changed. And then we did provide you with information from the Turquoise Trail Facility Master Plan to help you understand their needs. This slide is just to orientate ourselves as to the location of the 3 schools that we're studying in Turquoise Trail Charter School. The important piece of information about Nava, Chaparral, and E.J. Martinez. And one of the reasons they come up in the facility master plan and for continuous study really is that they have contiguous boundaries. That means that they neighbor one another. And therefore their students are within close proximity of any one of the 3 schools. You can see on the map that E.J. Martinez covers a larger geographic boundary area, but they do have contiguous boundaries and a pattern of declining school-age children in that area of Santa Fe. So in the original study, there were several dozen pages summarizing the information that the board could use to answer the first question of the study, and that is which of the 3 schools to keep. We'll just provide a brief summary of that information this evening. We were able to look at the 3 elementary schools and the information in the facility master plan from 2017, update and add to that information. So without going...
I'm sorry to interrupt. So now that some of these charts that are going to be shown, the typeface is getting pretty small, there are a number of presentations up here at the front if you need one. So that way you can read, because they get smaller, even the numbers. So that way you can read them really well and stay with us all. They're all up there on the table where the public forum sign-in was. Sorry to interrupt. Thank you.
Okay, Board President Creo. I'll continue on then. The chart summarizes what was depicted in charts and graphs and maps in the original presentation. So anyone who's seeing this summary for the first time could simply look at the categories in the left-hand column of how we were looking at the 3 facilities in comparison to one another. So I won't be going through those individual categories this evening, but we looked at things such as enrollment, capacity, the acreage of the property that we were considering, the number of permanent classrooms in the area, the number of students in the area, and adjacent property uses, as well as home values in the area and home sale information. So every property was really studied with the same factors in mind. This chart continues to illustrate those pieces of information that we provided to the Board of Education. And at the bottom of the second table, it's just a continuation of the same table actually. But at the bottom there's a number circled, and the reason that that number is circled under Chaparral Elementary School is we also looked at short-term needs of the facilities. As Dr. Garcia mentioned, a primary driver of studying these 3 schools is the age of the facilities. And our facility master plan tells us that the facilities have become antiquated, the systems have worn, it is very difficult to provide occupant comfort and programmatic flexibility in the existing facilities. And we continue to repair and maintain the existing facilities, but there are really some issues that need to be addressed in the near term. Chaparral Elementary School has $3.3 million in near-term need, and then EJ $5.1 million and Nava $4.8. That's what that chart illustrates. It's important to understand that none of these monies have been allocated in the 2017 bond. There's simply an allocation to study the 3 facilities and plan for the 2021 bond. As a part of our facility master plan and as a part of this study, we're always looking at enrollment across the school district. And the reason this chart has been referred to many times is to look at the areas of town and how our growth in enrollment is really shifting across Santa Fe. And I have a map in a minute to show that. But when we look at the south central area, Chaparral, EJ, Nava, Salazar is in that same contiguous area, we do see a decline in student enrollment, which we believe is associated somewhat with the reduction of families in the center of town. Of note, the schools that are on the south side, where we've spent a tremendous amount of our capital dollars in the last 2 facility master plan updates and the last 2 bond cycles, has seen the largest uptick in students in the area. That's where we find our more affordable housing. There is more density, and our enrollment in those schools, in fact, are continuing to remain steady or increase in some cases. This is a 3-part map that just shows, you know, architectural research consultants' ability to articulate over time how our city is changing. And so these dots and circles represent students and the density of students across Santa Fe County, across Santa Fe Public Schools School District. And we can see a shift in the density because the more dots there are in an area, the more students are living in that area. Some of those dots represent multiple families and multiple children. It's not a one-for-one. But in 1995, there were a large number of students and families in the center of town, closer to the area of these schools. And we can see as we move from 2004 through 2017 that there's been a tremendous shift to the southwest and the south part of town, which makes sense. It aligns with our previous graph where we show our enrollment and our student populations has dramatically increased in the south part of Santa Fe. These maps are meant to illustrate the senior population in the city of Santa Fe, greater Santa Fe. The reason it's relevant is that the areas of town where these schools are showing an aging population. At the same time, we're seeing a reduction in school-age children. So it makes sense that less and less families are living near the areas of E.J. Martinez, Chaparral, and Nava. If you see that in 2020, which is just 2 short years away, 50% or more of the people, the folks living in the areas of town closest to these schools will be in an age group that just we wouldn't expect to have children. I do want to make note that Architectural Research Consultants works with the city, they work with the county planning office, and they also work with our census data, and they work with student enrollment data from the state and from Santa Fe Public Schools. So this information is based on birth records, it's based on enrollment information, real student data that's pulled from our student information system, and this information in the charts and graphs represents real families, real students. None of this is approximated unless it's a projection out into the future looking at enrollment or aging population. It's also based on trend data. So when we look at enrollment and information pertaining to where students are, it's studying long trends over periods of time to project this information. So now we'll get into the analysis and recommendation section. We took the prior data, as I outlined in that first section, and we provided the board with sort of a roadmap to studying the answer to the first question, more or less. And so we were looking at a lot of school issues. We weren't just looking for the most suitable building today. We were looking at the most suitable neighborhood and size of lot and future projection around where students might continue to live in our community, among many other factors, to determine what would be the best investment and the best place really to commit to having an elementary school in the center of town. So again, we lined up all the 3 schools, Chaparral, EJ, and Nava, using exactly the same criteria, and we used a ranking system that we thought would be really easy to visualize and articulate. And green meant that in that category, the school was the most favorable for an elementary school now into the future. Yellow was, it was an okay condition, looking at the future as an elementary school. In red, it was some sort of a flag that this just wasn't a good fit. So if you look through the 2 pages of summarized information, you'll start to see some trends in the columns of the red, yellow, and green markings. So this is the second page of, basically a continuum of a study of the 3 schools. And then finally, we took this data, and now this is all crunched onto one slide, which we know is hard to read unless you're looking right at your packet. And we were able to find a pattern that Chaparral Elementary School had the most green or favorable conditions for identifying its future as an elementary school. And so for the first question, what site should the district keep and rebuild? Chaparral Elementary School met the most criteria for that condition. So if in fact the Board of Education determines to make that they are to make that decision around Chaparral Elementary School being the school to keep, as mentioned earlier this evening and throughout the previous weeks, there will be enrollment and assignment impacts, because what will happen is NAVA and EJ students in boundary areas will need to be redefined in relationship to other adjacent schools, and we'll need to revisit our enrollment and capacity in surrounding schools. So there's really a boundary change and shift of broader proportions than just these 3 schools. It's the decision really starts to touch other areas of town. But what we're able to illustrate in just this very early model, and again, this is a preliminary model. The boundaries aren't drawn, or we're not voting on them this evening. But the early model shows us that the difference between the current assignment areas, which this map articulates, the sort of mustard color is E.J. Martinez, the bluish purple in the middle is Chaparral, and then that lighter shade of pink adjacent to Chaparral is Nava. If you look at the next slide, let's see, did my slide change? Yes. You'll see in the proposed boundary areas that E.J. Martinez, in fact, has a large geographic capture reassigned to El Dorado K-8 school, which helps another neighborhood school that is declining in enrollment. You'll see similar patterns for Aspen and for Chaparral. And if you look at the details in the chart, what's most interesting is that the projected enrollments in this new proposed boundary model still keeps our schools under capacity in our enrollment projections. So what it's showing us that even without 2 schools in the model, that there's more than enough seats for students at adjacent schools. And so you just see a shift in the boundary map and a possible solution for the proposed assignment areas and enrollment projections should Chaparral be the only of the 3 schools to be rebuilt. Okay. And finally, the Board of Education asked the superintendent to determine if one school is rebuilt into our remaining, which might be a good match or the best match for assignment of Turquoise Trail Charter School. So we did some work with Turquoise Trail Charter School. We were able to get their student data again and look at their programming on their website and in their facility master plan, and we did a very similar comparison. So Nava, EJ, Chaparral, and Turquoise Trail were all studied with the same categories in mind. And this shows us information about Turquoise Trail in relationship to EJ Martinez and Nava. And what that information tells us is that EJ Martinez would be the better of the 2 matches for Turquoise Trail Charter School, should the board wish to offer them that once their lease is non-renewed on the Highway 14 property. Of course, we have many questions about what that would look like for Turquoise Trail, for Santa Fe schools adjacent to Turquoise Trail, for the students. So we did try and articulate some assumptions Some assumptions are that the Turquoise Trail Charter School enrollment will stay about the same no matter where they live, and that Turquoise Trail Charter School students who do not live in the former Turquoise Trail boundary area off of Highway 14 will in fact follow the charter to whatever facility is offered and accepted by them. We also assume Turquoise Trail Charter School will draw a number of students from within the vicinity of the new school. So what does that mean? If Turquoise Trail Charter School were offered E.J. Martinez school building, we would assume that some students from that former E.J. Martinez boundary area would in fact opt to go to the charter in the district building. We also assume that students living in the vicinity who are already transferring to another Santa Fe public school will continue to transfer to that school. Again, ARC has worked with us for a very long time on enrollment trends, patterns, and things to expect when major changes happen like this. So these assumptions were based on past patterns of behavior and what we've seen around charter schools and school buildings and assignment areas. This map is meant to articulate, again, the students assigned to Turquoise Trail Charter School and where they live. So we were asked to work with Turquoise Trail Data Office, and we were able to obtain student information with addresses assigned to the students at the charter school. And this map, particularly on the right, shows you that the charter school students are coming from all over Santa Fe. At the same time, it shows us that over 140 students live in the former Turquoise Trail boundary area and have to attend Amy Beal. So they're not able to go to the charter school because of the lottery system and the preference given through lottery rather than geographics. This chart shows us what our enrollment could be expected to look like if Turquoise Trail Charter School were given E.J. Martinez as a facility option. It shows again what our enrollment would be at the adjacent schools, at the 3 schools previously studied, Chaparral, Nava, and now Salazar, which is adjacent to those 2. It shows that Chaparral would really still stay reasonably sized, as would Aspen, Gonzales, Salazar, Kearney, Pinon. They'd all really stay within their capacity range. It does start to address to some degree the schools in the southwest part of town where our enrollment has really been pushing the envelope, those K-8 schools with large enrollments, but it does not solve for that entirely. That might require another boundary shift when we obtain the Turquoise Trail building, the building off of Highway 14. But this is our first pass at what that might look like. I think this concludes the information. I realize it's a very dense presentation, even when abbreviated, so I'll just stand for questions at this time at the pleasure of the board and the superintendent.
And board members, questions? None?
I have a question. Christy, thank you for the presentation. You mentioned regarding a rebuild for either of the 3 sites. A rebuild is an example for $19 million for Chaparral. What does rebuild mean? Is that an addition? Is that tear it down? What does rebuild mean?
Board President Carrillo, Board Secretary Garcia, Superintendent Garcia, we've, in the facility master plan, identified these 3 schools in need of some combination of rebuild and renovation. We have not determined at this time that they need entirely to be rebuilt, but it needs to be studied to a level at which we can move forward that program and determine final pricing. We know that elementary schools at a base would start somewhere around 19 or 20 million, assuming that there'll be some rebuild and the population will be around 400, 450 students. But those assumptions have to move forward through a programming phase where we would come back for a final request. I think it's important to note that if all 3 schools were rebuilt in a combination of renovation, rebuild, and new build, we're looking at costs nearly 3 times that. Not quite, because Nava is smaller, but this is just articulating if we narrow down the facility improvements to one of the facilities versus 3.
So really quick, our assumption is actually the $19 million is based off of what estimate?
the board president, board secretary, and Superintendent Garcia, the assumptions are that the conditions identified in the 2017 facility master plan will allow us to reuse some parts of the campus and have to rebuild others. So we have to remember that these facilities continue to age. So if this conversation and decision is moved to 2021 bond, the needs will continue to be aggravated. So conditions will continue to worsen. We might not be able to reuse some things, but there are some assumptions that we'll be able to rebuild portions of the facility, build some new, and renovate. At this time, that's our assumption.
So the assumption, once again, is you mentioned that by the assumption of roughly $19 million, which we don't know yet, is that what it would cost you to rebuild or remodel Chaparral? So that $19 million would actually be added to our next bonding capacity cycle?
Board President Carrillo, Board Secretary, Superintendent Garcia. So we'll have to go through a prioritization process for the 2021 bond cycle. This won't determine how much we can bond for. Our bonding capacity will be determined with our bond advisors in our finance department. But what this would tell us is one of the projects, perhaps, to prioritize in the 2021 bond might be the rebuilding of an elementary school. Will that become a highest priority project? I can't tell you until it goes through the Citizens Review Committee in the Board of Education priority process. That $19 million is already a part of over $250 million in identified need district-wide. So how that is prioritized for a $75 or $100 million bond remains to be determined. That would be much at the discretion of the Board of Education and their Citizens Review Committee.
So thank you for the work that the Citizens Review Committee does, but ultimately it is the Board of Education that actually decides what the priority is. And so in the last priorities of the last bond, 2021, wasn't it already prioritized that the high schools would actually see the next majority of the bond through the Board of Education prior to I was here, and also the Citizens Review Committee?
Board President Carrillo, Board Secretary Garcia, Superintendent Garcia. At this time, the priorities for the high schools have been funded in the 2017 bond cycle. What becomes the next priorities in 2021 is yet to be determined. There was some assumptions made during the facility master plan that the rebuild of one of these elementary schools would move up in the priority rankings because their needs are so many, so great, and the facilities aren't getting any younger, and we still have students using these facilities in conditions that are not optimal. So the priorities for 2020-21 have not been fully articulated. The only priorities that have been voted on and submitted to our Public School Facility Authority are those already being acted upon in 2017.
On that point, Mr. Garcia, is that okay?
Sure, Rudy.
Mr. Carrillo, is that as we prioritize, it is on, green light's on anyway. I'll get it closer to me. So as we look at those priorities, keep in mind also that as we look at ECO, right, that there's like a second phase to that also probably will be thrown in that mix for priorities. Mandela will probably also be thrown in that mix of priorities. So there are others, pieces that have yet to be identified as we go through the process and then look at what's up next in the queue in the facilities master plan. So at the end of the day, what we're basically saying, regardless, even if you have these three schools not in the mix, there's a lot more need than there is what I think is an appetite to go to the taxpayers for. We increased last time from $75 million to $100 million, if you recall. And, that's something that you're right, Mr. Garcia, the board will have to decide. Do you stay at the same level? Do you reduce? Do you increase? A lot of difficult decisions ahead.
So on that note as well, and then Maureen, on that note as well, because I imagine there are people out there that are kind of thinking, well, why don't we just put the money, rebuild NAVA or EJ? And because we're talking about bonding a lot, the thing to consider is, one, what Ms. Yonda Wagner said, $250 million in need. We raised the bond last time, right? We went from 75 to 100, so taxes went up just a little bit. And for $100 million, and a lot of that stuff is already earmarked for like early college and Mandela and different things. And a point of clarification, it was actually the 17 bond that was earmarked more for secondary, and the 21 we haven't really discussed yet. But the thing that the public really needs to think about, and Dr. Garcia alluded this to, is how this is very separate from operational, right? The operational dollars are the dollars that come from the state that actually fund the teachers and the classrooms and everything that goes on. And it's the capital bond, the GO bond, that funds all of the maintenance, rebuilding, and things like that. And so for me personally, I would feel it irresponsible of me to ask the public to fund building more than one elementary school, given the entire needs of the district. If it ended up coming in at 19.1 or $20 million. And it could easily come in at less. Atalaya was completely rebuilt for 13 because they maintained a portion of the property, right, was able to be reused. But that's how you have to think about it. So 3 elementaries, if they're $19 million each, that's $57 million. If we can only bond for 100, that's more than half of it already used up just for 3 elementaries. So we have to think about this not only in terms of 2017, but I mean, we're honestly, when we're looking at these decisions and bonding, we're looking out to 2021 and 2025 and beyond. Really long-term planning relative to our capital needs. Ms. Cashman in the back to Mr. Garcia.
I just want to clarify something for Board Member Garcia. Even though we are doing some work at our high schools, we don't have enough money to complete the projects that we need at the high schools. So we're doing that in increments and steps. So it would be reasonable to think that in 2021, we will continue to work at our high schools. Our high schools have sat out from bonding for many years while we focused on our elementary schools. And so I just want to make sure that you don't think that 2017, that takes care of the needs at the high school. It takes care of a small portion of, especially at our 2 comprehensive high schools, it only takes care of a small portion of their needs. And they're expecting that more work will be happening in 2021.
Thank you for the clarification. As mentioned earlier, the 2017 bond was to deal with the secondary schools, which we haven't dealt with the secondary schools, as you know, Board Member Cashman. And also, which you just mentioned, we don't have enough money to fulfill the needs of both high schools also. So thank you for clarification on that. So Turquoise Trail, I see we have some blue shirts in there from EJ Martinez, probably Nava out there, and there's also some parents here from Turquoise Trail. So Christy, our superintendent, what talks have we had with Turquoise Trail? Have we actually sat down with them? Have we actually sat down with the students? Because the last time that I actually voted for this is to send them a letter based on the fact that we would actually educate and talk to the children and explain to them what's happening or what's going on.
We haven't met with the staff or the students at this point. We would have to get the permission of the school leader actually to go on their side unless we have a community meeting. What we did do was invite, I always get it wrong, the executive director, the head leader, I forget, you have an interesting name. Doctor, no, I know it's doctor, but the head of the school, as well as the chair of the governance council. We did meet. They were great. They did cooperate with us in providing us the data so that we could conduct the study. They have received the letter in terms of the lease. So at this point, because the board hasn't made any decision, there isn't anything new for us to really meet and talk about until there is some recommendation made one way or the other about possibly a facility. The issue around the lease, as you are aware, we have sent several letters from our attorney basically letting them know that the intent is to not renew the lease and trying to get information as to why they believe that the lease would not be terminated. It is not an eviction. It is, the terms of the lease are up, but it's not, I believe, for several years still. We have, I think, was it 3 more years. And so the reason that we did this early was to allow for planning time for people to be aware versus notifying people, you know, at the very end. We did produce FAQs. Those are on our website. But if we were invited, we would be more than happy to meet with the Turquoise Trail community.
Thank you, Superintendent. Thank you, Mr. President.
Ms. Cashman?
Oh, I don't
Oh,
have
okay.
any, I just wanted to
Oh, is that one?
respond
Great.
to.
Ms. Noble, any questions?
Mr. President, I'm going to save my questions for when we get to the action items when we're there, as I'd love to hear from anybody who signed up for public forum, especially those who have small children who might need to go to bed at some point.
Okay. One of the reasons we don't have a lot of questions tonight is this is the 4th time we've seen this. So that's why we may not. The only thing I want to comment on is slide 15. So those of you that have your packets. Just really, I guess it's 15, 16, and 17, just really paying close attention to the factual information as it relates to the green, yellow, red. Because this is really, I mean, I would almost say that these slides are kind of really pivotal as to why we make whatever decision we make. So if there's no more questions about the abridged presentation, has everyone, I'll give you another, this is the last chance to sign up for public forum, because once the slip is over there, that's it. So has anyone that wants to sign up for public forum not had the opportunity to do so? Great, and let's make sure, terrific. And then as that's being done, Mr. Ryan, if you would then please read the ground rules for public forum.
Ground rules for public forum. Please listen and speak with respect. With no uncivil conduct will be permitted. Please do not discuss any specific student who is not your own. There's no sharing of time. Please self-monitor and observe the 3-minute time limit, and I will give you a 30-second warning when your time is almost up. Public commentary and dialogue is allowed only during the public forum, not throughout the meeting. And please search for answers for common ground. You may speak on any topic, whether it's on the agenda or not. Your input will be taken into consideration. And please be advised that the board may discuss your issue during the meeting, but by law, the board cannot take action on items that were not on the published agenda. I will call 3 people up, and if you would wait in line back here for the next person, we can expedite the process as quickly as possible.
How many people is it for tonight?
President Creo, we have 14 people
Terrific.
signed up.
Okay, and we do adhere to the 3-minute rule. So if you wrote a massive statement that's 6 or 7 pages, you're not going to be permitted to read the whole thing. So think in advance of where you may have to have your own abridged version of what you present. Mr. Ryan, let's begin.
A couple of the speakers want to have students present with them. They'll still have the 3 minutes for the entire group, but they want to come up together, I believe, based
Terrific.
on this. And the first speaker is Ray Griffin, principal. Then second will be, I believe it's Hazer Maz. And the third, Katrina Miller. Thank you very much.
Board President Carrillo, board members, Secretary Garcia, thank you for allowing us to speak this evening. My main point is to have 2 of our Turquoise Trail students talk to you, but very quickly I would like to challenge 2 major assumptions in the study. Number 1, the win-win situation, there was no data on that point. So if you were to ask the communities whether it's a win-win for E.J. Martinez and Turquoise Trail, I think you would find some data that would be contrary to some other assumptions in the study. Secondly, a major assumption on this page that says enrollment, assignment area, impact, an assumption says Turquoise Trail school enrollment will stay at about the same 400. Are you aware that the PEC has given us permission to grow to 850 students? So that assumption cannot be true. And 850 students will not fit into a 350-student building. And with that, thank you for allowing me to introduce these two wonderful sixth-grade students from Turquoise Trail. They'll introduce themselves, and they'll start right now. Audrey and Katrina.
Board President, board members, and Superintendent Garcia. My name is Katarina Miller.
I am Hajar Moz.
Okay, so we are only asking you let us keep our building because over the last 27 years, students have made memories and left their mark at the school, including tile wall that I have a piece in, my sister has a piece in, and most of my friends have pieces in.
There are also bricks in the front of the school with meaningful names on them and other important items, including a TTCS time capsule that students have put letters to their future selves inside. Would a different school know who Susan Phelps is? Our library is named after her. Would a different school understand the meaning of our tile wall? Who put up each tile? What message is behind each tile?
I have been at TTCS for 8 years, which means since pre-K. So this school has become my home, like it is to all the other students and all the teachers there. So please don't move our school. Thank you.
Thanks very much, girls.
Excellent work. Thank you.
The next three presenters, Harry Filippo, Francesca Margaritando, and Desiree Sanchez.
Dr. Ryan, will you let them know when they have 30 seconds left, please?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Are we only given 3 minutes as a school? Is that what I understand? Okay. Thank you, President Carrillo. Thank you, Superintendent Garcia. Thank you, members of the board. Chrissy, thank you from Architectural Research Consultants. Nice presentation. My name is Harry Phillips. I'm a teacher since 2001. I have lots of experience here teaching Peace Corps, Navajo Nation, public schools, as well as Turquoise Charter School for the last 5 years. I have to say that Turquoise Charter School is one of the strongest communities I've ever worked for. I've talked to many former educators where my students have gone on, and they've been recognized as being the 4.0 students. Many other middle school and high school students have recognized our students as being outstanding compared to many of the public school counterparts. And for one example, I'd really like to recognize Raven Calloway Kidd. She received a full scholarship to Santa Fe Prep this year, and that's something that's outstanding. I know she is very talented naturally, but I feel like Turquoise Trail has helped to bolster that and nurture her natural talents and help her achieve even greater. If you would like to speak about your scholarship just for a minute.
Hi, I'm Raven Calloway Kidd, and I wouldn't be going to Santa Fe Prep, especially not with the scholarship, if I hadn't gone to Turquoise Trail. Turquoise Trail has given me everything that I needed to succeed and more. I've received amazing help from all of my teachers. I can't think of one that hasn't added something to me. And even some people who weren't my original teachers, I've been helped by them, and it's all because of the amazing community at Turquoise Trail that I've gotten this help. And I wouldn't be going to Turquoise Trail or Santa Fe Prep if Turquoise Trail hadn't been where it is now. So that location is very, very important to many students that go there, because they wouldn't be getting any education like that if it had been anywhere else. Thank you.
So just to complete my time, thank you, President Carrillo, Superintendent Garcia, members of the board. I also feel very strongly that in a sense, the community should not be punished because of poor planning. And in a sense, we've seen the gentrification of Santa Fe going on. Thank you. So as a teacher of 15 years, I know planning is essential to the success of my students, and I know that if I was not to plan well for their success, it wouldn't be them to be punished, it would be myself or the head administrator. And so I thank you for taking into consideration our community's needs.
Thank you.
President of the Board, board members, Superintendent Garcia. My name is Francesca Margaritondo. I have 3 children at Turquoise Trail Charter School, one very excited about being a pioneer in the new middle school. There has been a lot of talk amongst hundreds of Turquoise Trail parents regarding the Santa Fe School Board and which members are up for re-election and what we can do about that. The vast majority is talking about finding suitable replacements to run against them in 2019 and 2021. I'm not sure I agree. The respectable group I find myself talking to have the advantage of experience. I strongly believe that this esteemed group could prove their value by finding a valuable solution into the overcrowding in Southside schools for this coming school year. And that is the key, a solution now, not years down the road. If you succeed at taking the Turquoise Trail building, this wouldn't happen for several years. 3 for the lease, and another 5, 6, maybe 7, up to 10 with the legal battle, because I assure you, Turquoise Trail parents are proud of their school and are not going to let it go without a long, drawn-out fight. Meanwhile, the students at Amy Beale, Niño Otero, Camino Real, and Cesar Chavez will have to continue in a learning environment that is not ideal with more than 30 students per classroom. So please stop wasting time, energy, and most importantly, taxpayers' money on a solution that does not help any students right now and may never help them. Instead of attacking Turquoise Trail, use it as inspiration. They did not give up when their middle school went into a zoning hiccup, and they couldn't use the location next to the movie studios. So they found a new location within a number of days. I bet you could do the same. Maybe some portables on some land around the 599, off of Airport Road, or even down the road from Turquoise Trail, or a rezoning solution that could use the schools that you are threatening to close. Thank you. The money you're going to fritter away in a legal battle could be put to good use for that. And on a final note, I have also seen the demographic maps for Turquoise Trail students. The vast majority are zoned for those Southside schools that are already overcrowded. If you close Turquoise Trail or it closed for whatever reason, it would make that problem exponentially worse. And by the way, E.J. Martinez or any of the other schools you were proposing could never hold our more than 700 enrollment cap that we just got approved for. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Next, we have Desiree Sanchez, followed by Char Rothschild and Melissa Jacobs.
President Carrillo, board members, Superintendent Garcia, thank you for allowing us to speak tonight. I wrote a little something. Let's hope I can stay on track. Good evening. My name is Desiree Sanchez. I was here last year and I spoke to you while you came down on us hard during park testing, threw all of our kids, teachers, staff, everybody into a frenzy. Unfortunately, here we are again. My son will be going into the 5th grade. He has been at EJ since kindergarten. This is a school he knows and loves as well as I do for the teachers. When I saw this, I know that this doesn't go until 2021, so by then he's out of EJ, he's into Milagro Middle School. With that being said, I'm not okay with EJ being closed or even moved to another facility. I tried to read over the facilities master plan, which is great. However, there's a bunch of gibberish and way too many assumptions in there. Doesn't seem like a lot of facts and data plan, just a lot of we assume, we assume. That's not helping none of us. Also, looking back to February, we all voted on the SB 9 mill levy. I watched Superintendent Garcia's wonderful YouTube video that encouraged all of Santa Fe to go out and vote. I'm just kind of going to touch on a few points with what I took from that. In that video, it says these funds are used for leaky roofs, school security systems, broken playground equipment, proper heating and cooling systems, clean facilities, and for healthy and pleasant places to learn. If these funds are available, why haven't any of these schools been taken care of under that mill levy, which is renewed, I believe it said every 6 years? That's my first question, and I don't understand that. Superintendent Garcia stated in her video these funds will impact every school in the district, but obviously not EJ, Nava, or Chaparral. Why? Is it because they're too old? In the video, you show Atalaya, which has been rebuilt. You show Nino Otero. You show Amy Bill. You show all new schools. You don't show any older schools. Why are you leaving us out? In the Santa Fe, New Mexico, it was stated that in the Santa Fe, New Mexican, it stated that approximately $13 million a year would be collected from property tax and then distributed. But how are these done? One last statement. I didn't get through everything. I'd like to make is that in the Santa Fe, New Mexican, it was said, as for the Santa Fe public schools, it makes little to no sense to pay millions of dollars to build or renovate buildings and then deny the dollars needed for proper upkeep. It's the equivalent of buying a new vehicle but refusing to pay for oil changes or new tires, which you haven't done for any 3 of these schools. And I just want to say, you need to think this through before you decide to close them, because you haven't been proper in your use now.
Thank you.
The next 3 speakers are Melissa Jacobs, Nicholas Palafis, and Nick Jones. Thank you.
Hi again. I'm Melissa Jacobs. I have a daughter at EJ. I think we've established that. Board members, board president, and Superintendent Garcia, I truly sympathize with you. Closing any school is not an easy decision. Honestly, it shouldn't be an easy decision. It affects too many Santa Fe families. I applaud the board for being proactive regarding future enrollment in relationship to current school conditions. That being said, I would like the board to consider the following before voting on the facility proposal from May 8th. Please limit or restrict inter-zone transfers before accepting any proposal that involves closing schools. Inter-zone transfers promote segregation and discrimination both of race and social status. All students deserve the same education experience no matter what school they attend in their district. If a group of parents want an exclusive small school education experience, then they can choose a private school or a charter school. Do not expect the rest of the district population to compensate for their elitist attitude. Interzone transfers also decrease the relationship between neighbors. If a student goes to school with their neighbor and that student has an emergency at home or is being victimized, they are more likely to go to their neighbor if they know them through a school or social setting. The second point is boundaries need to be addressed before you vote to close a school. It does not make sense to vote for boundaries to be changed after a school has been closed. You remove that opportunity. I find it hard to accept that other schools, according to your own data in 2017, there are 5,163 children in grades K through 6. Between 15 schools, simple math states that would be an average enrollment for each school of 350 to 400 students. That is the middle ground, not 186 downtown and 500 to 600 on the south side. Schools that cannot accommodate at least 300 students should be omitted before larger schools with lower transfer rates. I do not just speak for my child at EJ, I speak for the PTA and all the other students affected by the school district's proposed changes. Please do not vote on this proposal tonight. Either oppose it or postpone it. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Our next speaker is Nicholas Palafis, and then Nick Jones and Isaac Dean.
Good evening, Dr. Garcia and board and president and everybody from our community that's here. I just wanted to take a second. We're pretty tired by the end of the year. I'm a teacher at EJ Martinez, but I did have the opportunity to talk to students democratically and intimately in my classroom with regards to what it would take for them to wake up every morning and be excited about coming to school. I said, "You're not already excited about coming to school?" They said, "Well, we love you and we are, but we see our brothers and sisters and our friends and we're not sure that we're excited about school." And I said, "Well, that's very interesting because I know that, you know, staying in high school and going all the way to graduation is an important thing." So I asked them, what would you like to see? They said they would like to spend more time outside. They would like more experiences with other people. They said they would like school to be designed differently, their daytime. They would like to start later so that they could sleep in a little bit more. 8:30 was the suggested time. They wanted the school district and teachers and principals to know that they have a life outside of school. They would like more time in school to be able to interact with each other and socialize with each other. They would like more integration between the science areas, and they would like more hands-on social studies. They would like more time outside using nature to learn about science. They would like more diverse after-school activities that would be exciting to them, make them excited about coming to school. They would like more opportunity to express themselves in their community. These are things the kids said. I was just like, what else, what else? What would make it better? In high school and middle school, they said the chance to visit other schools, the chance to have guest speakers, the chance to do community service. And with regards to dropping out, they said that they didn't feel like kids got enough attention in school, that class sizes were too large and schools felt impersonal. These are what the kids had to say, and I think they're great and prescient recommendations. For young people in general, if we would just do half of these things, I would think we would see a great increase in the education that the kids are getting and their excitement to be at school. What they're not excited about hearing again that EJ might close. They're pretty sad about that. And nobody doubts that you don't understand that this is not something that we would want for ourselves. But what we do expect is more innovative type thinking. I don't think as much as the community as you may think is on board with your master plan. I think if we use the same consultants to do planning for the last 20 years, maybe we should get a second opinion. And anyway, I just want to thank you, and I want to thank the kids for caring about their education enough to give us these recommendations.
Our next speaker is Nick Jones, followed by Isaac Dean, and then the Gonzalez group.
President Carrillo, board members, Superintendent Garcia. Wanted to start by thanking you for your service. It's a really tough job that you guys do, and I'm glad that you're willing to step up and do it. I wanted to particularly thank Secretary Garcia for recommending to outreach to the Turquoise Trail community, of which I am a member. I have a son going to Turquoise Trail. My other son will go to Turquoise Trail in its current location. I wanted to say that I realize that you have nothing but dilemmas in your job. You're presented with multiple bad choices, and you have to decide which of those bad choices is the least bad choice. Taking an amazing school like Turquoise Trail and uprooting it is one of the worst choices you could make. I don't pretend to know the details that you guys do, and again, I would like to thank Secretary Garcia for being willing to share those details, which I look forward to seeing. I just want to say that the Turquoise Trail Charter School is an autonomous unit right next door to you guys, has such potential to be a friend. And I hope that you guys can reach out to Turquoise Trail and work with Turquoise Trail to help solve our mutual problems. Because I'm sure that we're all in the same boat of wanting to get the children of Santa Fe the best education possible, which is something Turquoise Trail does extremely well. I wanted to point out on that slide with your assumptions too, which is really suspect because there are mutually exclusive assumptions. Like that all of the children in Turquoise Trail are going to stay and go to Turquoise Trail, yet somehow the school is also going to absorb students from wherever it moves to. It just doesn't work that way, and whoever put those assumptions together didn't seem to understand that. So again, I really look forward to seeing not the abridged presentation, but the full presentation as well as the data that it is based on, so that I can help you guys make the right decision or the least bad decision. Again, thank you for your service. I really do appreciate it. I'm a very active parent. I really want to vote for you all and to have you continue to do the good work that you do, but there's no way that my son is going to go to any other school other than Turquoise Trail in its current location, and I am going to work very diligently for the next few years to help you guys realize that. Thank you.
Isaac Dean, next will be the Gonzalez Group, and Andrea Gomez.
Thank you. Board members, president, vice president, thank you again for having us. As repeated, I have a daughter in Turquoise Trail, 6 years old. She just graduated Miss Solok's first grade, and she's testing at a 3rd grade level. Took the tests in March. You know, something's good is going on at that school. You know, I am a product of the Santa Fe Public Education. Went to Sweeney Elementary. I went to Alameda Junior High, went to Capitol High, and I finished my schooling at Santa Fe High. The biggest problem I had going through school was crowding and no programs that would keep you interested. I felt that the VOTEC, you know, offered welding, as you were commenting on some of the programs, auto mechanics, building trades, you know, engineering, CAD, you know, 3D modeling. I mean, the opportunities were endless versus what Capitol High had to offer as a crammed school, you know, with limited potentials. Turquoise Trail offers my daughter arts, you know, she has sports, math. I mean, she's doing algebraic computations, which are even challenging me a little bit to read a little bit, you know. It's like, whoa, my daughter's pulling out some things, you know. And I would just like you guys to consider that, you know, it may be a role model that, you know, something is going on here that is good. And I never thought I'd be like an active parent coming to the board members, you know, with an issue or a problem, you know. I don't know much about the stats of Christie's presentation, but I did feel they're pretty vague. I'm a mechanical contractor here in Santa Fe, and our business has been doing business for 40 years. I didn't see any numbers on heating, plumbing, framing, remodeling, anything in those that would project those numbers. And I would just like to consider that maybe you would look into having some local bids, take a look at those, or have a second opinion. Thank you very much, and have a good night.
Thank you, Isaac.
We have Arian, Asher, Aji, Adi, Esteban Gonzalez, and followed by Andrea and Mandy Mendoza.
Good evening, Ms. President, Superintendent, and Board. My name is Adi Risa Gonzalez, and my family lives on the south side of Santa Fe. We support finding a solution that would allow Turquoise Trail to keep its current facility on Highway 14. Thank you.
Thanks, Adi.
Our next speaker is Andrea Gomez, and followed by Mandy Mendoza.
I'm sorry, were there others from the Gonzalez, Esteban, were there others that were speaking from your family? Okay, great. Okay.
Good evening. My name's Andrea. I didn't really come prepared with any kind of statement. I just knew that the meeting was happening, and I got here as quickly as I could after work. I'm a single mom. My time is spread pretty thin. and I don't really have support from the other parent. The school that my children go to is E.J. Martinez. They came from Aspen Magnet School. My experience there is that they got shuffled into a larger class group, and my son's education was failed. Like, kindergarten failed him. He went on to first grade. We got rezoned into EJ, which was a blessing. The staff at EJ Martinez has taken the time to spend, like, both of my children actually have needs. My daughter has behavioral needs and my son has learning needs. And if it weren't for the staff at EJ Martinez, my son would still be looking at a first grade reading level now in the third grade. He didn't even know his alphabet when he started first grade. And Miss Montoya took time out of her day, unpaid, after school to teach him how to read because there were no other programs, knowing that I was at work until 10 o'clock at night. She took her time out of her day to do that for him. Miss V. Hill has had both of my children in her classroom and has also helped them flourish, giving them skills, giving my daughter skills on how to communicate with the other children without the conflict or without as much conflict. Miss Mia has contributed to his learning. I don't know of any of the teachers at Turquoise Trail that would take time out of their day to spend teaching a 6-year-old how to read. Or Mr. Carty, who's taught my son how to tie his shoes because he's left-handed and I'm not left-handed and I don't have a left-handed person to teach him. They're filling the roles. They're basically helping me raise my children. They spend more time at school than they do at home with me. And they have grown to love the staff there. Granted, by the time 2021 comes around, my son will be going into 6th grade. But at the same token, we mentioned that we're still trying to work on the high schools. Well, guess what? All of these children are going to end up in that high school that still needs help. So why aren't the funds going there? Thank you.
And our last speaker is Mandy Mendoza.
This is the worst kind of deja vu. We were right here last year. It was the governor's fault. It was the governor's fault. It was the legislature's fault. Well, whose fault now? Because it's not them this year. We're not facing a budget shortfall. And also, you said that our community is moving. There's not going to be enough kids there. Most of the population is turning into the elderly population. That's just not true. I actually have an inner zone so that my child can go to EJ because I wanted her to have that small school feeling that I had when I was in Santa Fe Public Schools. I own a house on the south side of town, so I drive 20 minutes every day to get her to EJ because I love these teachers. Just like she mentioned, Mr. Carty, I had him this year. He is awesome. All the projects that he does, Ms. Garcia was her kindergarten teacher. She came out of kindergarten reading chapter books. That's how awesome these teachers are. So I see Miss Armijo walk her grandkids every day to school. And then just like clockwork, at 3 o'clock, she's right there to pick them up. And those are her grandkids. Mr. Salazar, exactly the same. Every single day. I know these people because they're a community. So I have a few questions for you all. I don't understand how a decision can be made tonight to close these schools when you guys don't even really know the cost of what it's going to be. These kids aren't just numbers or little dots on a paper. They're people. So are the parents. We're all people. I don't understand what happened from last year to this year. Last year, like I said, it was the legislature's fault. It was the governor's fault. That's all I kept hearing back from you all. It's not their fault this year. So what happened? President Carrillo last year, in fact, this morning on KOAT, they had you holding a sign, Save EJ, with those kids, that rally. When I was talking to you, Dr. Garcia, what happened? I would really like to know that. Because these are your constituents. Are we constituents? Or is it just another political thing? I need you to realize that these kids they're people, not dots. Thank you.
President Carrillo, board members, and Dr. Garcia, that concludes our public speaking.
Sorry. Thank you to everyone that came and spoke. So what I'd like to do is for a few points of clarification, not argument, but just clarification, okay, relative to the presentation. First, if it's okay, Dr. Garcia, to have Ms. Yonda Wagner talk about SB and mill levy, how the money does really touch every school in the district, and how that's different from the GEO-bond money in terms of its purpose and use.
Certainly, Ms. Wagner.
Board President Creo, board members, Superintendent Garcia. The mill levy money is used for maintenance, so it's not used for large construction projects like we're talking about here this evening. The replacement and rebuilding of schools is typically funded through the general obligation bond. So when we're looking at maintenance projects, all three of the schools that we've studied, Nava, EJ, and Chaparral, have had significant maintenance projects over the last 5 years. Including simple things such as reflooring, painting, refurbishing, replacement of singular units, ADA compliance, parking lot refurbishment, gym flooring, furniture replacement, and so on. So I don't have a comprehensive list here with me this evening, but it is our goal to distribute these improvements throughout Santa Fe Public Schools, throughout the school district. Unfortunately, there reaches a time in the age of a building that there is a requirement to replace an entire heating and cooling system, which is a much larger price tag. It's not replacing a unit for a few $1,000s. It's replacing an entire system, which in our schools can be upwards of $1.5 million, $2 million. So that's where you're seeing these larger numbers. The $19 million plus price tags is associated with full system replacement versus a small repair on a broken unit. What happens in the maintenance cycle when it comes to SBHB is there reaches a point at which the repair is simply a Band-Aid. So even though we can distribute these funds and seek repairs in these three facilities, there comes a point at which we have to make a choice to replace entire systems.
Okay, thank you. For clarification as well, a gentleman brought up no numbers and vagaries. This was a very abridged presentation. The facilities master plan is online, where everything is itemized dollar for dollar for every school in the district. Every little piece of what needs to be done at every one of our sites, including those sites that are not used for kids, transportation and things of that nature. So you can go online and see that, but there's no possible way to present that this evening. And then as well, even in the 94 slide presentation from 6 weeks or so ago, it didn't drill down with every dollar being spent on every project in every school, but it is available for the public to view. I want to let the reason I think, Mandy, you were here in the beginning of the meeting. This meeting is happening tonight, and I know I was there with the sign, and I marched with everybody, right? And that's, I know that. But we're having the meeting tonight because we asked the superintendent to get more information. We knew this is issue that we would have to revisit. And if we don't make a decision tonight, we're going to revisit next year. It's just, all of these things are coming up, and we can't just keep kicking the can. We have to keep looking at these facilities and how they relate to the rest of the district. And because the lease issue with Turquoise Trail, it came up as well, we asked them to be a part of the entire study. So, but just for clarification, I wanted you to know about how the money figures in, and everything really is itemized. There's so much detail. If you want to go back to the last slide presentation with the 94 slides, it's online, and also the facilities master plan. And I commend this board and also this district for just being extremely transparent with everything. Even the lease for Turquoise Trail is online, so you can see the section that we referred to a number of times. So that having been said, did you have something, Dr. Garcia, that you wanted to say?
I just wanted to clarify something. Last year, when we were looking at closure, they were looking at saving operational dollars the following year. And that was an issue around whether there would be enough funding. As it turned out, we were able to balance the budget. There was an increase in funding, so we didn't have the immediate need. This is looking long-term at the capital costs. There will be operational savings in closing those schools, but the need is not so imminent where we would have to do it next year, which is why that could be postponed for 2 or 3 or 4 years. Because we don't need the dollars right now to balance the budget as was thought last year. And so I can see why you would feel that way and what you heard. I would be thinking the same thing, but I just wanted to clarify that. Thank you.
And on that note, for anyone that heard that there was an increase in our budget, we did not have an increase in our budget last year. We had less of a decrease. We were expecting an upwards of $7 million shortfall for the district, and it ended up being a lot less of a shortfall. For this year, we had a $1.4 million shortfall. So we had to scramble. If any of you were present for any of the meetings in January, February, March, April, right, around budget, you can see how it's just like the gentleman said, we make the least bad decision, right? So that's what we had to do relative to budget, but we had to make up for $1.4 million this year. And I would place that squarely on and last year, and I would place that squarely on the legislature. That's where we are now. Either of the board members have a point of clarification or anything they'd like to say before we move to board update and follow-up? Ms. Noble.
I just want to say thank you to everybody who has bothered to show up tonight. It strengthens democracy. It strengthens our work as a board. There is one parent who has rocked my world with her comments and has really been very deeply in my mind for the past week. And I really just appreciate the passion, the engagement, and particularly those of you who bring forward productive solutions and understanding of how difficult this is and what this public service means from the board members. And I want to thank my fellow board members for and all the district staff for caring so much and for doing this work, because it's not easy, and sometimes there are threats or assumptions or misunderstandings, and we spend a lot of time up here and are really doing our best. It's better when you come and engage, and thank you to those of you who are, especially those who are positive and productive. We really appreciate it.
Thank you, Ms. Noble. Mr. Garcia.
Board Member Noble, very well said. And so once again, thank you all for coming. And just remember, this is a public building. This is your building. Whether you go to the county commission chambers or the city council chambers, this is a public building. So thank you all for who did speak. Thank you.
Great. Next item on the agenda is superintendent update and follow-up.
I don't have any superintendent's update or follow-up this week.
Okay. Next item on the agenda, item 8 is consent. It's budget adjustment requests. The only comment I have, because we didn't have board review this time, is I'm kind of super duper excited to see it here. Dr. Garcia, what I'm seeing is that we're going to be spending then $971,258 from the clean energy renewable bonds, right?
That is correct. And Mr. Halford is available if there's any additional questions, but you are.
I don't have a question about it. I'm excited to see it. Yeah. Well, because this is, I mean, sometimes people, they're always, not just on us, but they're ragging on school districts around the state for having too much admin. It's admin that did this. So every time you see a massive solar array in our district, it's admin that did that made it happen, and the clean energy and renewable bonds. And what happens is that whole Department of Energy Conservation has paid for itself many times over because of their innovation in using the clean energy renewable, conservation energy renewable bonds. I might be getting the acronym wrong, but it's the same kind of a thing. And we were the first in the state to really go after that money that the legislature set aside. So, and to see almost $1 million here for projects at El Camino and Capitol is huge. So I'm just excited that we're approving that tonight. Ms. Noble.
I'll move for approval of the budget adjustment request.
Second.
Any discussion or comment? as we always do, even though there's one item with consent, we do this roll call. So, Ms. Noble?
Yes.
Mr. Garcia?
Yes.
Ms. Cashman?
Yes.
I vote yes. So consent passes.
Thank
Next-
you, Mr. President.
Oh, of course. So, next item on the agenda is item 9. It's the only action item for this evening, and it's around the study of the facilities. Which site to keep is item 1. Considering enrollment assignment areas number 2, and which may be suitable for Turquoise Trail number 3. So if it pleases the board, what I'd like to do is separate these. I mean, typically we just vote on everything as one action item, but I don't necessarily think that's appropriate for this evening. I think there's one decision that we can make definitely tonight because the information, the facts are overwhelming, and that is which of the 3 of these anyway to rebuild. And so is that okay with the board then to separate that out relative to the decision tree that we were shown? Ms. Noble?
That's fine with me. I want to point out that in between numbers 1 and 2, I think there is an assumption there of closing schools that is not explicitly called out, which makes me uncomfortable.
So then, no, I agree with you completely. So then what we can do then is call it out, right? So when we get to 2 and 3, just name what it is we're considering and not trying to hide behind other language. Would that be okay with everybody? But first, what would, first, because that's a whole thing that I want to get drawn out on, is it okay to make the first decision on the decision tree regarding which to keep and build? Ms. Cashman.
I feel very uncomfortable doing that. I think there should be 3 separate decisions, but I think the first decision needs to be which site to keep and rebuild and what will happen to those 2 other schools. I don't think I would not want to say, okay, I'm going to rebuild Chaparral, and then what is happening with Nava and EJ. I think those 3 schools are tied together in any one in the first decision. I don't think they're separate call-outs.
Mr. Garcia? What?
What's your decision? You asked us what we want to do. How do you
Well,
want
I
to
would
go
say, I mean, if you would agree in separating the building out of one of the schools, then I would say there's 3 of us and we can go ahead and do that and then approach the really larger looming question of how to deal with or repurpose or the challenges that we face relative to the other schools. Is that Ms. Cashman?
I guess I would prefer to talk about the other 2 schools first before we decide which school we're rebuilding.
The well, I mean, I mean, we could certainly do that. I think we. No, I disagree. So I think that we can. I think that the information is overwhelming, and I think that we can actually separate out, if you will, decision 1 on the tree first, and then approach the other 2. I think it's the most expeditious way to approach the entire issue, and then also allows us to take into account what the public said relative to the other 2. So yes, Ms. And then I'm going to make a motion in a minute. Yes, Ms. Noble.
I guess I agree with Vice President Cashman. It's all connected. I can't disconnect it in my mind, and to some extent it will depend on the motion that is made and how we go with that. So, you know, as we move forward, I guess I think we can be a little bit more fluid as we do this.
I mean, we're split, so that's fine. So let's go ahead then. Then the motion would very simply be, I would move that we authorize staff to move ahead with planning to rebuild Chaparral Elementary School in its current site, And then I would ask that we postpone the decision on closure or repurposing of the other two elementary schools, E.J. Martinez and Nava. That would be my motion. Is there a second?
Explain to your motion one more time.
I would move that we authorize staff to proceed with plans to rebuild Chaparral Elementary School. You know, come back to us in the CRC, obviously, with plans for that. And then the second part would be to postpone any closure or plans to repurpose E.J. Martinez or Nava Elementary. You got to say it for the people that need to hear you, and also the video and everything else.
No, I just explained that you don't have a second, so we need to move on.
So we don't have a second? That's fine. Then we're in a quandary. If you want to, yeah, go ahead, Ms. Cashman.
I know we'll have some discussion on this, but I would make a motion that we go ahead and have the staff begin developing plans to rebuild Chaparral and close E.J. Martinez and Nava.
I would ask, that no threatening or disparaging remarks or sounds are made, because I know Ms. Cashman and all of us, we take this decision, we live with this every day and every night. And but I would just ask, is there a second? That's a challenge that we face that the four of us don't have control over. Sir, please be respectful. Public comment is over. You have the opportunity to speak, and that's over. So please appreciate our format here. Is there a second for the motion that Ms. Cashman just made, please? Hearing no second, that motion fails. So then I would... so then I would ask Ms. Noble and then Mr. Garcia.
So I have a couple of questions, very likely for the superintendent. I hope everything's all right. And maybe some of the staff, what is, and I sort of heard Christy allude to this when Secretary Garcia was asking questions earlier, what is the advantage of voting on which school to rebuild tonight? Is it that we maintain the existing property better and preserve the assets there? Is there any particular urgency around the decision of which school to invest heavily in rebuilding be made tonight?
There, Mr. President, members of the board, and this is just me speaking, and Ms. Wagner, if I am out of line, then please feel free to correct me. But May 29th is an arbitrary date set by the board to bring a recommendation to you. That is not a date that was set by the staff.
And forgive me if I walked out right at the time, do we have, relative to closure of EJ and Nava, do we have an estimate of recurring money that would be saved in an ongoing way?
We have an estimate, Ms. Wagner, in terms of operational costs for the two schools. We do have the operational budgets for all the schools, but are you prepared to talk about that in terms of operational savings? And again, that keeps in mind, just so the audience knows, principals, counselors, librarians, some of the staff that would not be duplicated. It does not, obviously, the kids will still need teachers, they would still go to schools, et cetera.
Board President Creel, board members, Superintendent Garcia, when this matter was studied as in relationship to budget in spring of 2017, it was determined conservatively that approximately $1.52 million would be saved by keeping one school open and closing the other two. And that was based on some assumptions that Dr. Garcia just provided to you, and that is that there, the students are going to have to go to neighboring schools, and the students are going to have FTE assigned to them. There's also going to be a reduction at the same time in principal, nursing, counseling, custodial, insurance, utilities, etc. So there is an operational savings that we would want to better articulate based on current enrollment and data. And I know the operational budgets for each of the schools are available to you, but that wouldn't be something you want to keep in raw form when you're considering the savings of the closures, because the students still need to be served irregardless of where they go.
Thank you very
But
much.
the first part of your question wasn't answered, I don't think.
It was.
Then I'd like to comment on it if you will.
Okay.
I mean, I think there's an advantage to making it sooner rather than later, because it allows the staff, and there's budget in the CRC, if there's budget in the bond, to then go ahead with some planning. If we can start planning for that building now, we're talking about Chaparral, of course, to plan just whether it's program and how many students roughly, and what the building might look like, maybe preliminary drawings. If all of that work can be done within the 2017 bond and in these next couple of years, or the soonest, then perhaps something comes to us in 2019 or 20 where there's maybe money in the 2017 bond that can be used, so the project then is shovel ready in 2021 or 2022. It allows us to expedite the process for that building. I mean, because if not tonight, when? At the end of, in August? Or, I mean, it just keeps, the can just keeps going, I think, down the road.
So thank you for that, and just for my fellow board members, that was the question that I asked, because I feel like, and I'm not sure it's a fair choice, but I feel like we have this understanding of, okay, what we would use our operating money for other things, like raises, if we had more of it. And I wanted to understand, and so that was a question I had sent to the superintendent. And in context, $2 million, we know that is the entirety of the budget gap we faced this year. However, it is only about 2% of our operating budget, which is, for the audience, at roughly $100 million. And I guess I am, because I do see this all as connected, and I think that though it seems very likely that the decision will be to invest in rebuilding Chaparral, I think we need to know what is happening to the other schools in order to make the plans for that building. So, and I just sort of want to say, as a shout out, my favorite one to make to my 5th and 6th grade science teacher at E.J. Martinez, Betty Graham, who pushed us to, because that's where I went, and then Capshaw, and then Santa Fe High, who pushed us to observe objects and observe more deeply than we thought possible in the 5th and 6th grade. And it is still this sort of magic feather that I cling to in working on these decisions. I am inclined to ask that we postpone all of these decisions for 3 reasons. And one is that I think we're operating under a false urgency. I do understand the utility in making this decision sooner rather than later, and in preparing the communities, and I appreciate that we have done this 2 years in a row. But we are not in, partly due to the good work of the superintendent and the staff, we are not in a budget crisis this year. And we are talking about planning for a bond in 2021, and having done a little bit of work as to what is the preparation time for a bond like that, it's a year to a year and a half, it seems, and perhaps there's utility in a little more time, but by all of the homework I've done, we can responsibly plan for a bond starting either next year or even the year after that. The second reason is we do not have representation for NAVA, and I'm not sure about Chaparral if that is in Lorraine Price's district, but I am uncomfortable moving this decision forward without representation for those schools on this board in some form. And I think that we owe it to the community that they have a representative sitting on this board when we make a serious decision like this. And number 3 is perhaps the most profound and the one that is most important to me, which is that we are seeing a strong set of changing conditions. And I hope that we can meet those changing conditions with our best updating. And I understand that the way we've always done it is to move forward as schools age. But the next level of schools that we're going to be looking at does include Acequia Madre and Wood Gormley. If you look at the facilities master plan, there's 4.3 points difference between EJ and Acequia Madre, and I think we need to not do this piecemeal. The most important of the changing conditions, though, is that we're getting a new governor at the end of the year, or rather in January. And we have a lot of will in many of the gubernatorial candidates to really work on improving the public education. I honestly, the system and what we're doing, I think we've bottomed, and I hope we're going to start coming out of that. And what I've heard tonight from many of the folks here is actually about the importance of a strong community in a school. And I really take that very, very seriously. And I think that we have to think about this as a complex and human system and not a linear system that is, I get that we have seats and we have a certain number of students and we have demographic projections and realities, but this is a very complex human system, and I think that we need to dig in, update our business model, understand the new conditions we're facing with a new governor, a new mayor and city council, and that we need to look at our portfolio of offerings and the connectivity to the planning. I forget your name, sir, the teacher from Turquoise Trail, but good planning is important, and I think we need to work with our colleagues at the city, at the county, and really work to do this in a more integrated way. And Maya Del Margo, who I don't think is here tonight, is the parent who rocked my world a couple of, well, I guess maybe last week, when she said that if you close EJ and Nava, this is taking the middle out of the public school district. And though we can say that that is not strictly true, my son goes to Gonzales, which I would say resides in the middle. Chaparral is also in the middle. It really hit me because we are seeing a growing wealth gap, a growing achievement gap, so many growing gaps between haves and have-nots that I think it is our duty and responsibility as board members to not bifurcate the system and create more giant South Side schools and small privileged East Side schools. So, in the spirit that I believe in, I want to not just criticize and say no. I want to offer solutions. I want to ask how we do this work in an integrated, intentional way, not push to be more a tale of two cities, but to keep a middle, to enhance safety and community, which is easier to do in smaller schools. How we evolve our business model for the greater good and to appeal to more students and families by creating strong communities with our schools. How we understand that there are some students who really struggle in large schools, and I have an example of a kid who got ulcers and moved from Gonzales to Acequia and is thriving. And though I went to EJ, and of course it'll always hold a special place in my heart, when we went through this last year, I really fell for Nava, because Nava is a place where anyone can, it seems, be themselves and be welcomed in and embraced as a part of that community. So I really hope we can work to, and I want to do this work, and I'm going to be working on a series of resolutions I woke up early this morning and I wrote one. But I hope we can understand really the complexity of this human-driven ecosystem and not just think about it as seats and slots, and work to think about how we make this better for students, for families, for the education system. Because of my background and inclination, which is in city planning and community development, and I really appreciate the presentation and what it looked at. We have some of the best data around. And I know there was criticism of the assumptions, and I agree, you know, if the assumptions are sort of the way we've always done them, there's a set of assumptions that go in. But we have very good data, and we do have a lower birth rate, we do have an aging community, and most of all, we have a housing crisis. And if you look at the information in the longer presentation around Chaparral, we have greater density, we have more affordable homes, homes that start with a 2 in the 200,000s rather than the 400,000 or 500,000s around EJ. But we have a housing crisis, and I think not only do we have a new governor who can work on the education system, but we have a new administration at the city, a new city council, and they're working quite hard on the housing situation. And the resolution, which I can bring up at board discussion later and pass out copies to my colleagues, but is requesting action to address the housing crisis in Santa Fe, suggesting some possible solutions as to how this might happen, and really calling on our colleagues at the city to work with us in a more integrated, community-based way and start this conversation as to how we keep this community vital, how we make this a place where people can raise children and have their families, and not just give up to an aging community where we are closing schools unless they are sort of protected in some way, and give up to the demographics moving south and west and children moving out. So I hope that we can pass this resolution next week, work with our partners in a more community-based, integrative, comprehensive way to address our housing issues, and do the work that, you know, I don't want to do this again, although I'm sort of saying we have to, but to ask our parent communities, to ask everybody who's in the audience and who cares about this, to help us update the business model, to help us identify the actions that will really make change and evolve our system, and let us reinvent how public education can be of better value to everyone with equity and equal access and opportunity, the great dream of public education that really is the leveler of society and the thing that prevents privilege being the only determining factor of a young person's success. And that's what we have to do. So I guess with that, I would move to postpone all of the action items that are on our agenda tonight.
So you can make a motion to table, and you would need a second, of course, and then and it would be tabled. You can make either way, but if you make a motion to table, there's no discussion. After a second, it's voted on and it goes up or down. And if you make the motion to postpone, it's just up to you which direction you want to go. If you make the motion to postpone, get a second, and then we'll discuss and stuff like that. So it's a question of actually whether or not you want there to be discussion.
I'm comfortable with the motion to postpone.
And is there a second?
I'd just like to bring up a couple of things, Mr. President, if you could bear with me for a little bit, actually.
No, first, is there a second?
Second.
Okay. And then Mr. Garcia.
So I actually very well said, Member Noble. I'd just like to bring up some of the other items that I feel that is a little bit unclear to myself. Is first of all, thank you, Superintendent, for the budget that you did and your staff for the excellent scraping that you did actually to come up with the additional money to keep the schools in operation. I don't have a copy of the operational costs of what it costs to the closures for these schools, or actually what it's costing the district for these schools. I would like to see a 5 to 10 year plan. Us as a school board here, we actually need to have a full board, and I understand the situation. I'm okay with that. One of the things that we're dealing with is this boundary change. My south side schools are growing like crazy out there. We have many subdivisions on my south side school that I feel the Board of Education needs to address. And sure, there's not growing pains on the east side, but definitely on the south side, there is some growing pains out there. I think we need to have this comprehensive plan for the bond. What are we going to do as a Board of Education? We keep saying, well, let's take some of the bond, let's do this. Let's take some of the bond, let's put this school in front. I just feel that's kind of throwing a curveball on our priorities, so we just need to sit down as a full board and figure out what our priorities are. Turquoise Trail is thrown into this, and we still need to work with Turquoise Trail. How are we working with Turquoise Trail? I'm not too comfortable with how we're actually working with Turquoise Trail. I know we do have some time for that, and I think the superintendent or staff are reaching out to Turquoise Trail. We would actually like Turquoise Trail to reach back out to us, and let's compromise some way, somehow. So those are the things I would like to see from Turquoise Trail, not just the Santa Fe Public Schools giving everything to Turquoise Trail. So just keep that in mind, if you don't mind, please. And then also, like I said, very well said, Member Noble. Thank you for all of you for being here.
Ms. Cashman.
Once again, I appreciate my board member comments. I think I brought this up a year ago. Let's not touch this issue if we didn't have the political will to close or consolidate. We're right back where we were a year ago. And I think this is unfair to those communities to leave them in limbo when we know we have aging facilities and we have too much capacity at our elementary level. I would prefer to have Board Member Price here. However, I also know when we made a change to Amy Beal, we had a full board, and even though you had a board member that advocated not to make that change, the board chose a different way. So I don't think having Board Member Price here or not makes a difference. I have kids at Amy Beal that live across the street from Amy Beal, less than 2 minutes to walk. They are not going to Amy Beal. The board made a decision to put them on buses. You know, we've got to talk, and I agree, we have to. I do appreciate Ms. Delmargo talking about equity. We have schools, and I went through the 92-page study that we have. It is appalling to me that we have any school that does not have enough population within their boundary to support being a school. My preference is that at least 70 or 75% of the kids are from that boundary, not from interzone transfers. So we have Acequia, 45% of the kids are from that zone. Atalaya, 36% are from that zone. Carlos Gilbert, 29% are from that zone. Gonzales, 57% are from that zone. Nava, 62% are from that zone. Turquoise Trail, 47% are from the boundary, or the zone. And Wood Gormley, 62%. So I agree, we have a big problem on our smaller schools cannot support based on the boundaries that are established. That is wrong when on the south side we see numbers like 99, 89% of those big schools. And the reason is, and I've said this since day one that I've been on this board, interzone transfers are great, but they are not choice. The choice is if you can provide the transportation, you can move your child. If a parent is working a couple of jobs and they rely on a bus to get their kids to and from, they don't have choice. They're going to their school that they're zoned for. They don't have choice. And unfortunately on the south side we're seeing that. So we do have a tale of two cities. But to continue to keep on saying, you know, we're going to delay a decision, I would rather say the decision is off the table. I don't want to keep on going through this for the communities and for us as board members if we know right now we don't have the political will to make the hard choices. I don't think we do right now. So I think and I think it's unfair to ask the superintendent and the staff to keep on going over this, mesh the data a different way for the board to come up when it comes for the hard time of the decision. We can't make it. So let's be honest and just take this whole thing off the table. I don't want to keep, I answer the emails that I get from parents. I explain my position to them, and I've tried to answer most of them. I explain my decision. If I missed your email, I'm sorry. But, I don't see, when I look at Amy Beal, there is no solution until we make some other solutions. That school is busting at the seam. You tell me as a parent, and any parent out here, tell me, I send my kindergarten kid to Pignon, and I send my 4th grader to Amy Beal. That's not right. We're not asking anybody else to do that. I ask the kids from Cerrillos and Madrid, get on those buses, bypass Amy Beal, bypass all these schools so you can go to Navas, so you can go, they have been doing this for 10 or 15 years. That's wrong to be asking them. So I appreciate the passion, disappointed with the board's sentiment on this when really the only new information that has been presented to us is to find out how many kids from the Turquoise Trail boundary would normally attend Turquoise Trail. It's less than 50%. And so we continue to say to those parents, and we'll keep on busing you. We'll keep on busing you. I know it's a passionate decision, and I'm not trying to take the heart out of people's feelings. Everybody loves their schools. Everybody wants a small school. We're not funded for small schools. And to be honest, it's not the small school that matters. It's the classroom size that matters. It is not the small school. I can tell you that my kids went to Pignon at the time when there were 16 portables, 750 kids. Those kids walked into that school, and my kids are as quiet as dirt, and I mean that. Dirt is louder than my kids. And they would, the teachers would recognize them. They would talk to them. They knew their students. It wasn't that 750 kids is a small school. It's that the teachers reached out, cared, and we need small class sizes, especially for our, before 3rd grade, to get those reading rates up. But I understand it's a hard decision, but let's be fair to the community and stop having all the turmoil by asking the superintendent and staff for another study, We've asked for more information. We keep on getting more information. And I think we just need to say, this is the way it is, if this is what we want to do. And I will say I wish Board Member Price could have called in and been part of the discussion. I don't know where she would have voted for it. I don't think any of us do. But, to just, as President Carrillo said, we're kicking the can down the road, and that's okay. Let's just acknowledge it and stop with, the turmoil that we're creating in this community.
Of course, Mr. Garcia.
Just really quick, I just want to clarify, mine isn't a passionate decision. I just actually think we have a lot of moving targets that the school board needs to take a time out and say, hold on, let's put all these targets together. Let's figure out the main target of what we're going to hit and what we're going to shoot for. Another thing, I've always said this, working for county government for many years, I sometimes feel that the county does their stuff, the city does their stuff, and the schools do their thing. As Member Noble said, we all need to come together as a community and figure this out, also with help from the parents. So that's why mine isn't a passionate decision. Mine is actually, we need to take a time out in the government and this local community and say, let's all work together and figure this out, because we're one government, we're one community. Thank you.
So a couple of points. First, what Mr. Garcia said, because it's freshest in my mind. Does no one think out there that there isn't a strategic plan, that there hasn't been, and there's been exhaustive planning by the district? Nobody think out there that for some reason we're in this situation because we didn't plan. I mean, the reason you have schools on the south side that were opened, we spent $130 million on new facilities on the south side opening in 2014 because we plan, okay? I mean, you know, nobody planned for going from 14,000 kids to 12,600 or 12,400 kids. We're not capable of planning for all of the shift in population to the south side to have basically development go unchecked, and to have the county, you talk about being partners, they're not a good partner when people come to them asking for permits for big housing developments, and they check the box that says no effect on public schools without even checking with us, okay? That's not, and that happens. That's happened in the past. And so and nobody could have planned, if you will, for the graying of Santa Fe. I mean, for God's sakes, you look at that one map where 60% or more, it's all going to be people over 60 in those areas, you know, and there's just not a lot of kids being born here anymore, and there's not a lot of kids, you know, coming into the district. So we have to meet those challenges. But to say that this district doesn't plan, we plan ad nauseum, okay? And if you came to more board meetings, you would know that. I'm not saying that you have to if you lose a bet, come on. But I know it's really hard. But it's what happens. It's what happens the first and third Tuesday of every month, okay? The planning happens. It's very challenging. I mean, I appreciate this, and I'll read this much more thoroughly, but I personally don't believe that it's the school board's responsibility or the district's responsibility to solve the housing crisis. Our responsibility is K-12 education, and now it's pre-K-12 education. And given how we're funded, that's all we can do. And Ms. Cashman brought up an extremely good point that she's brought up in every meeting. We are not funded for small schools. Small schools take operational dollars, and you've got to understand the way our funding comes from what's called the state equalization guarantee. And it's not, I mean, it started out as this kind of fair concept. It was the court Zuni Pueblo decision. And it's in concept, it's great. Yeah, out in Zuni Pueblo in different parts of the state, they have no property tax base. How on earth could they fund their schools, right? But now what's happened over the years is our kids get $7,500 a kid, but the kids in Wagon Mound get $15,200. So it hasn't, I mean, it's really gotten kind of wackadoodle, but that change has to come from the legislature, right? And which requires the involvement of absolutely everyone. On the point that was made relative to, and I know this was made during public forum, we have probably 7 schools that wouldn't exist at all if it weren't for interzone transfers, okay? We're not going to close all 7 schools, okay? All those kids have to go someplace, and it would just mean rebuilding, not rebuilding, it would mean a lot of new buildings in different parts of the city. I mean, when we have a very liberal interzone transfer policy, which in a lot of ways is really great because it allows people choice, and I understand when you say it, there's no choice without transportation. But one could make the argument that that does in fact increase equity because you're allowing kids to go to a lot of different places where they may not have had the chance to. But there's 7 schools that would probably not exist if we eliminated, we wouldn't keep them open. They'd have like 100 kids if we didn't have a liberal interzone transfer policy. You know, I agree with Ms. Cashman. We don't need to, I mean, I think this can be the definitive study that is now used for the next couple of years. We don't need to keep rehashing numbers and representing them in different colors on different slides. The information, it's the facts. These are facts. And ARC does an amazing job. One just has to look at the facility master plan to see that, and in drilling down on the numbers. I mean, it really looks like this whole thing is going to be postponed tonight. I'm not in favor of that because I really do believe that one part of the decision we should make tonight, we can make tonight. It doesn't necessarily affect all of the others. Actually, it doesn't affect them at all, because by deciding to rebuild Chaparral tonight, we're getting a jump start in making sure that there's going to be a new facility there sometime in the early 2020s, right? We can do that tonight. and it doesn't affect boundary changes. It doesn't affect allocations to different schools. I'd like to see us do that piece tonight. The just so you have it in your brain, the operational dollars for all these schools, this is strictly operational dollars for the 3 schools, is 3.197 million. That's what it costs to operate the 3 schools. Ms. Yonda Wagner made the point that obviously these kids have to go someplace, teachers move, and so the savings on closing, and I'm not suggesting closing right now, would be around the 1.52 million mark.
Mr. Correa?
Yes.
I just want to clarify something, because you did make a statement that I want to make sure is accurate. And maybe I misunderstood you. Did you say that if a decision was made today, there would be a new facility for Chaparral in 2021?
No.
Okay, what did you say?
I said we can get started on it. Somewhere in the early 2020s, there would be a new building. I said if we don't make this...
I just want to clarify that, because I don't think, we don't even go out to GeoBond until...
No, I know all of that. But the thing is, at the end, you gotta be, you know what? You gotta be respectful. Just be respectful. That's all. That's all. Just be respectful. So when we plan, like for instance, I'll give Adelai as the example, or I'll give the other schools, Nino Otero, El Camino, and then the work that was done on Pinon and Sweeney. Those were done over a number of bonds, right? You do some planning, architectural design work, programmatic work in one bond, and then you know this actually better than anyone, Rudy. So sometimes it appalls me that you ask, what are we doing? Because you were on CRC for 10 years. So we straddle, okay? So you do some planning in the 2017 bond so that you're able then to pull a trigger in the 2021 bond, and then perhaps have a building built out ready to open in fall of 2022. That's why you would want to make a decision sooner rather than later on Chaparral. You don't want to decide on Chaparral for a couple of years, that's fine. Then maybe that new Chaparral doesn't open until 2024, okay? All of this takes a lot of time. And on the elementary side, probably at least 3 years. When you start from ideation, what are we going to do on the site? Ideation, planning, drawing, going out to bid. And we use as much local as we can. You can talk to our procurement people about that, but I agree with you. And so it's like 3 years before anything can happen from ideation until a building goes up. All right. I think that's kind of it right now. It looks like we're kind of leaning a direction. I'm not a fan of kicking the can. Again, at least on the Chaparral piece, I think that's such an easy decision to make tonight based on the information that we've been given, and then we can postpone action on EJ and Nava. And I would agree with you that Maya's comments, that Maya's about eliminating the middle, I mean, she just like, that was just like a ton of bricks falling on all of us, I think. So, Ms. Cashman.
I think we know where we're going on the board, but I want to throw out something to my board members so you can just, by postponing decisions, we don't have an opportunity to realize things that are happening. I think we know we're going to have a new governor. That's a fact. We think that maybe a new governor is going to be supporting more education initiatives. One of the things, and I've thought about this, for Nava, we could repurpose that right now. We know that we don't have enough pre-K slots in our schools. Some schools can't have it. That community, I think, would be very amenable to having a pre-K center there. We wouldn't be competing with United Way. We wouldn't be competing with the community college. But we can't move ahead with decisions by postponing. But, I think we're ready. I think if everybody has had their say, I'm ready to take the vote on postponing all 3 decisions.
I would ask, is there anyone that has the wherewithal to just postpone? I mean, I know there's a motion, it can certainly be amended. And so then I would ask the maker of the motion if you would amend it to only postpone the decision for EJ and Nava, and to go ahead with planning to build out Chaparral.
President Carrillo, I'm not comfortable with going ahead with the plans to build Chaparral at given the changing conditions that we're seeing, and I think we will know a lot more in a year, and that I hope we can consider a more comprehensive look at all of our schools as we think about what things should look like in 10 and 20 years for this district.
Okay. And on that, yeah. And on that, so in a year, this is what, this is what, May? Okay, so the next legislature will have passed a budget, hopefully one that actually values public education. And so we can know if there's going to be an increase in SEG and operational dollars, because remember, they're separate, right? The issues that was coming up tonight had a lot to do with the buildings, okay, and the capital money, GO bond money, very separate. We can't use that money for teachers and stuff, and we can't use operational money for building stuff. Okay, so that's a really huge piece that that is important that folks get. We don't know any of that. We don't know what's going to happen with the project on St. Michael's in the college. Anyone that's been in Santa Fe, you know, into the early 90s knows how long it took the city to decide what to do with the rail yard. It was like 6 years. You okay? So we can't wait 6 years. And hopefully, we just can't. And so hopefully, the city will have a really clear idea maybe in the next 18 months what their plans are for that property and whether or not there will be housing. But if there's housing, there's no guarantee there's kids, right? Especially depending what they build and how they price it. And that's one of the biggest issues. So I understand. So there's been a motion and a second. Would you please restate the motion?
The motion was to postpone action on all of the items 1, 2, and 3 under A on our agendas.
And the second was by you, Mr. Garcia?
Yes, Board President.
Okay, let's go ahead. Let's make this a roll call vote because of the nature of the issue. So starting with Ms. Noble?
Yes, I vote in favor of the
Mr.
motion.
Garcia?
Yes.
Ms. Cashman?
No.
And I vote no, so the motion fails. So it's 2-2. When it's a tie, like on the city council and everything, when it's a tie, the motion fails. So I would ask us then to go back to considering the advantages of moving Chaparral forward and postponing the other two. I mean, we can just discuss it. I'm not going to make a motion. There's no point.
Mr. President, just so you understand why I'm not in favor of that, is just because that actually is gearing us up to say, yes, we actually are going to close these schools and rebuild Chaparral. And the only concern I have is I would like to see the school district actually come out with this boundary change that needs to be done for the entire district and this plan that needs to be done so we can actually move forward as a district as a whole. Because right now, that's where we are. We need to figure out where we are boundary-wise. And yes, the staff has done an excellent job. Yes, the planning consultant, ZRC, has done a great job. Yes, the superintendent has done an awesome job as into helping us with the budget, the shortfalls. So that's the only concern I have here. It's almost like we're gearing up to redo Chaparral. That's why I'm not in favor of that.
I understand. So in commenting on that, I would disagree with you, and probably within the education building industry, they disagree with you. Boundary changes follow buildings. It's not the other way around. So you change your boundaries based on what you know you're going to have. And so I would also disagree, because in past meetings, I've stated very firmly that I'm not in favor right now because I want more information relative to EJ because of the development that may or may not happen off of St. Francis and Rabbit Road and the expansion of Oshara, where are those kids going to go to school. That whole area is up for more development. And then also seeing what's going to happen, I hope it doesn't take 6 years, but what's going to happen at the College of Santa Fe. So I would disagree that by making the one decision, we're saying, okay, we're just kind of throwing our hands up and saying the other two are going to close. I don't think that's the case at all. I mean, if anything, we're making the one decision because we know that getting started on that, I mean, the facts are so clear in getting started on that We're allowing that building to be built out. We're allowing planning for the CRC. We're allowing planning for the public in terms of what we may want to do in 2021. And that does not say in any way what we're going to do with NAVA or EJ. And especially by separating them, you're actually affirming that we're not going to make a decision on EJ or NAVA.
So just really quick, we could stay here all night long, but just in regards to the boundary, I would hope that boundary adjustment changes follow where the growth is within the community, and not just necessarily where the buildings are, because, so I say this every other meeting, the growth on the south side is where it's going. Look at the chart Christy showed us. So I would hope that our boundaries take into consideration where existing buildings are, obviously, and take into account where the growth is going in this community. That's the south side.
Right. It's going to be challenging to boundary, you know, 300 or 400, probably 200 to 300 kids out of the south side into the other schools without a lot more busing. We do know that. I mean, we do know that. And without a lot more busing. Because if you want to fill the seats in some of these schools that are tragically under-enrolled, you're going to have to bring a lot of people basically cross town. You're going to have a lot of buses moving. You know, and if that's what the public wants and that's what the board votes on, then so be it. Ms. Cashman.
I agree that the boundaries need to be changed, but so I agree with Board Member Garcia. The boundaries need to be changed, but I don't want to happen is to make new boundaries and then go in and close facilities after the fact. However, you know, so I do want to know what's happening with the facilities first. However, I have a fundamental problem is St. Francis, you know, and I know I'll take a lot of heat for this. There is not a wall at St. Francis that says, this side of town, you're here, and this side of town, you're here. We need to change those boundaries, and we need to make them rounder, wider. I mean, we need to gerrymander so we get the things. It's not fair, and because we cannot provide the transportation, I am fundamentally opposed to putting those kids on the south side on buses to keep on coming and spending longer time. When my kids went to Pinon, as kindergarten kids, the school started at 7:30. My kids were on the bus at 6 o'clock. When they came home, school ended at 3. My kids got off the bus at 4:30. This is the reality on the south side. Our kids are on the buses for a long time. We've gotten better on our transportation end, but we need to change the boundaries. So I agree with Board Member Garcia, but I don't think we can do that until we decide what we're doing on the east side, because those schools cannot support their enrollment except for interzone. And so, you know, and this is a tension in the community. And this is a tension that happened when we had Lara Goite, Alvord, Connie, right? Mm-hmm. Yeah. The board made a decision to consolidate those, but they would not have the political will at that time to continue with the rest of the decision on Asikia and Atalaya. So that's why I am not willing to start piecemealing this decision. We either make it as a group, and when everybody feels pain, it's probably the right decision. But when some people feel pain and others don't, it's not a good decision. It divides this community. And so to keep on talking about small schools drives me crazy. Everybody wants a small school. I want small class sizes, and I want a quality education for all of our kids, and I don't want the kids in Cerrillos and Madrid to constantly be the ones that, because they have the less political voices out there, that whole Turquoise Trail property, you know, there are some very expensive homes out there, don't get me wrong. There's some wealth out there. But they should not be the ones that are on these buses forever. So I don't think I think the motion has failed. I don't think we've done anything except as a board, made no decision. And I think we should just move on to our next items.
So, Board Member Noble, I would entertain a new motion for you if you were so inclined. It's gonna be the same one, I don't care. Just make it.
I mean, I think it's clear how we're
Just
going to
do it again.
vote.
No,
You
it's
wa-
not clear how we're
Okay,
gonna
all right. All right, I'll make the motion again, that we postpone action on 1, 2, and 3 under A9 on our agenda.
Is there a second?
Second.
All right, let's do is there additional discussion? Let's go ahead and do a roll call vote. I'll start this time. I'm going to vote yes.
No.
Oh, I'm sorry, it's a roll call. Steve votes yes.
Board
Ms.
Member
Cashman?
Cashman votes no.
Mr. Garcia?
Secretary Board Member Garcia votes yes.
And Ms. Noble?
I vote yes.
All three are postponed. So, so odds are for the public, because all of you are going to get up and go now. So odds are it's May. You can pretty much count on us being here at the very same time next year, doing the very same thing right after we pass our budget. I mean, literally, the very same thing with the very same slide presentation.
I was just going to say, I will disagree with Board Member on Carrillo, or President Carrillo on that. I will not want to bring this up again. This same plan, I think it's, don't clap for me because I think it's the wrong decision. I think the board has, but I don't want to keep on bringing this up. I think maybe it's time, and I already know some people have said, we're running for your seat. Well, that's fine. Maybe it's time to have some new board members.
All right. Next item on the agenda is board discussion, possible action. There are two that are on the agenda already. I'll start with those. I have an additional one, and then I know, Ms. Noble, that you have one as well. The first item on board discussion, possible action is parent code of conduct. This has to do with athletics, okay? Not board meetings. So this has to do with athletics because a number of coaches, I mean, I go to a lot of stuff, and a number of coaches talk to me, and even when I coach soccer, you know, parents are the most challenging part about coaching athletics. It's not the kids, it's parents. And so what I was doing, I was looking online, and then a number of districts around the country, while they have parent codes of conduct, most of it relates to while they're in the stands, right? The NMA even has compete with class. That's nice, but that's where it ends, is it's nice. Then the parents after the game or during the week bully the coaches. And so, and that's just not okay. It's not as though their stipend can even come close to paying a car payment. So I would like us to adopt a board policy around a parent code of conduct as it relates to athletics. And I mean, there was a bunch of stuff. I'll just give it to you. I mean, you can look up online things also. But districts all over the country that I looked at, oh, criminies. There's so much paper here. And I'll just give that to you. So any other, I mean, what are your thoughts on that, board members? Rudy, you go to a lot of sports, you know.
Ms. Cashman has her hand up.
Oh, I'm sorry, Ms. Cashman.
I'm not sure what you're asking for because I can't remember in detail, but when my daughters played athletics, we had to sign a parent code of, you know, how to behave and not bully the coaches and that. So have we eliminated that?
No, we have that, but that's more about how parents are in the stands during a game. It's not about, and a lot of these, that's what they address. It's not about addressing basically how parents bully staff and coaches and refs, and yeah, I mean they do sign it. Students sign it and parents sign it. Code of conduct for athletics.
On that point, Mr. President,
these are for you.
There is policy 608, I believe, and then I think there is a parent code of conduct that needs to perhaps maybe revisited or updated. Now, I think the issue is more so enforcement, and what does that mean? You know, it's sort of like you can have a restraining order, it's only as good as the person you're restraining. And so when you look at what are the consequences of that, so are the children
Eliminated
then
from sports.
eliminated
That's what one
from
of those
that?
says, yeah.
You know, and what would that mean? So again, I would want the board to vote on this if you want us to pursue it and work on it, or bring that back, is kind of how we've been proceeding with this.
Mr. President, I think one of the most hardest and rewarding jobs is actually coaching. That's not the first and hardest job. The first and hardest job is actually being an educator out there. I went to a second grade class a while back and I said, whoa, I could never do this job, and or a fifth grade class. But I think it's really, that's really needed, is to look at a parent code of conduct for sports. I'm for it. I would like to look at it. But one of the things when it does come forward, I have some reservations, questions in regards to what exactly is it going to say, what does the existing policy say, and enforcement, who enforces it?
Well,
How do we
so
do that?
what
those
I'm
are
hearing
questions
is
that I
yes,
have.
there's two of us that say we want to have you look at that. Maybe 608 needs to be revised, and maybe there needs to be an AR associated with it having some consequences. Ms.
I believe
Cashman?
there is an AR, but I don't know what the consequences
All right,
are.
Ms. Cashman?
I guess I would, if the superintendent and her staff would look at it to see if we need to make any changes, because I do remember signing something when my kids were.
Yeah. Well, it's like all
but-
these others, that we sign those, but then parents bully their coaches and refs. Okay. So if this is going to be ready, I mean, it's your timeline, if this is going to be ready for August of the coming year for athletics.
Well, let me see what we have. It
Okay.
might be a simple thing to come back and just say, this is what's there. You know, are we willing to say that we're going to,
I'll look at it also.
you know, eliminate children from participating because of parents' bad behavior? And so, you know, there's some tough, it's not an easy,
And that's
I
what
think,
happens
a
in select
decision.
sports, you know?
Well, regardless, it's
Okay.
something that the board has to decide. If it's more complex, then I will say we'll be back in August.
All right. And it has to be back, I guess, at time, if school opens in the first week or second, kids are signing up and filling out all their papers in July. So just timing-wise. The second item I had is, yes, I'm sorry, yes, Ms. Noble.
Maybe this comes later, but just to voice it, I think at some point we might want to hear from some parents.
Around the
and-
issue?
Yeah.
Well, we'll post it on the agenda. We'll, it's always on Monday in the education section, a lot of what we're doing. It's always online. So if you want to hear from parents, we'll see if they come when we have it on the agenda. Yeah. Okay. 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 So the next item on the board discussion was exit interviews. The reason I put this here is people that I knew that retired, but then also others that I know are leaving the district. None of them said they had exit interviews. None of them said they were, I know this, I get this here. But what I'm telling you is my experience in the field. None of them said they were asked. None of them said they met with a principal.
They are given the opportunity to. Now, if they choose not to, I mean, I don't know what to say, because I do believe, and I have checked informally, just to test it out myself. You know, when people separate from the district, they are given that opportunity as they're signing out everything else to complete the survey or to follow up. Now, you know, we can't hold a paycheck, we can't force them to. So the fact that people tell you they don't, I don't know. Maybe they didn't pay attention. They're in such an excitement to leave that they didn't notice that they checked off
Right.
that opportunity. But we'll follow up, and but the survey results are fairly, I mean, we get a good number considering the people that choose to do it as far as surveys goes, and I think it gives us a good idea of perhaps why people leave. And then there's some that retire and they want to come back and they're not going to tell you. You know, they didn't like Principal X or they don't want to burn bridges. So, but we'll keep working on it, sir.
Okay. It's here just because my understanding is I haven't met anyone that's had an exit interview. But hold on one second. Besides someone being asked, please don't leave because we want you to stay, and having a meeting with you. Because, no, I know you've done that with people. Please don't leave. We'd love to do this. But that's been my experience. I'm very concerned, honestly, about the extent to which it's being done, the forms that are being used, and what we're learning. And I'll read that information that you gave me. Ms. Noble.
Thank you, Mr. President. You all have a copy of this draft. I would welcome any of my fellow board members who would want to co-sponsor this and work on improving it with me. What you'll see is a rough case about the housing crisis in the whereases, and in the therefore be it resolved, actions could include some or all of the following, including, Board President, what you brought up, that we ask the city to commit to adding houses on the College of Santa Fe property, because I do think that's important and moving forward in a timely manner. And then there's requests for active partnership with the city and commitments to sort of the integrated thing. But President, what you said, I agree with. Housing is the city's responsibility, and the responsibility of this district is around education, but it is deeply affected by housing policy. And it was actually former board member Mary Ellen Gonzalez, who at some point said to me, which is the tail, which is the dog, and that the school district is often reacting. So this is really an effort to jumpstart a conversation and collaboration with our colleagues at the city, and to try and be more active in determining the future of the schools and how our city will look. So I will work on revisions. They can go through the superintendent for anyone who is interested, and I hope that we can consider this as an action item at our next board meeting.
We can consider it right now. Is there a second person that wants to put this on action for the next board meeting?
I'm okay with it.
I'm sorry, I don't think procedurally you can take action and vote on an item.
We're not voting on an item.
Well,
We're just
you are voting to put
no.
it
We
on.
just have two people that want to have it as an action item for June 5th. We're not voting on the resolution.
But it's not on the agenda. I'm just telling you, don't shoot the messenger.
I'm not shooting the messenger.
But
We
it's
are able to do
it's
this.
not on the agenda.
No, I know that. And all we're doing is informally saying we can do this by.
Yeah, don't
they can,
vote, is what I'm saying.
We're not voting. I just asked if there's another person. Okay, there's two people. It's going to be on the agenda June 5th. And what I'd ask you to do is make sure that by maybe June 2nd, that we have the actual copy with changes that's going to be great. So my biggest concern, so you know, since this is, we're discussing this, but it wasn't on there, is who's going to do all of this stuff, and what is it going to cost? Because there's a lot of action in here. There's a lot of people doing a lot of things, and I would just, so when we do this on June 5th, just that would be some of the things I'm thinking about. Anything else for board discussion and possible action? Yes, Mr. Garcia.
Just really quick, I would just like to thank my colleagues up here, because as a few of you have mentioned, it's not an easy job sitting up here. And we always have this room always filled whenever there's crisis in the community. And as President Carrillo says, it'd be great for everybody out there to watch our board meetings and see what we do up here, and or what the superintendent does, what we're responsible for the community. And I feel that we do an excellent job, and we'll continue to do an excellent job, because our priority is actually the children in this community. So thank you.
Thank you, Secretary Garcia. Mrs. Cashman, do you have anything?
No.
And the other thing I have that we need to put on either for June 5th or June 20th, or schedule a special meeting for an executive session, is superintendent's contract. It's quickly going to be June 30, and we need to discuss what we're doing, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah, so, and this has to be done in June. Can't be done in July. Yes, Ms. Cashman?
Yeah, we probably should have a separate executive session to discuss that. But then I have something else to bring up.
On that point, Mr. President,
Yes.
Mr. Ortiz is not available until after the 14th, so
Okay.
my intent was to come back to you and let you know. It shouldn't, yeah.
On the, okay, the 20th is a Tuesday, so so 13th can't do it. Just trying to think, so I hopefully you have some clear scheduling in June. Well, the 5th is a Tuesday, so the 19th is a Tuesday. Yeah. But this executive session is not going to just take an hour before a meeting. It's going to be something that needs to be scheduled independently. So maybe by the June 5th meeting, everyone have an idea of that, the week of the 19th, or like where you can have an evening to spend several hours.
You've already done my evaluation.
Yeah. I don't know, just we got to block out the time, right?
Maybe we could look at June 21st, which is a Thursday, if our lawyer is available.
There's
No.
audit committee that night.
Oh, okay. Then June
20?
28th.
What about June 20? Well, we're getting into advanced planning now, which is fine.
Yeah.
Nobody has any other board discussion? So for advanced?
I do have one other board discussion.
Okay.
I'm sorry.
That's all right.
I just, if you haven't received it, we need to reappoint or assign new people to the audit and the CRC committees. So again, I know some people have already said they're not coming back, but board members, please figure out who's going to serve at your
And we'll
pleasure.
have it on a future agenda item. Those will be agenda items.
Let's go ahead and put that, can we have that on, because this is always done the first part of June. Can we have that on June
It's
5th?
It's scheduled for June.
Great.
You have two members on CRC and one member on audit.
You have, because you took over Linda's seat, one of yours is Ms. Randall, and the other is Marty. So just see if they want to continue serving. All my three want to continue serving, so anyway, check in with that. So advanced planning, the executive session around the superintendent's contract. What about the 20th, Wednesday the 20th? And it doesn't have to be 4:30, it can start later. You can start at 5:30 or, is that okay with you? We don't have to do it 4:30.
Doesn't matter.
It's a separate meeting with this only one item. You're fine, what?
Okay,
You
so
gotta,
that's good.
okay.
June 20th.
June 20 and Ms. Noble? Okay, June 20. Why don't we start at 5:30 instead of 4:30? Is that okay with everybody?
Yes. Yes.
So 5:30, June 20, we're going to have the super's contract. Okay. Anything else for advanced planning?
I do have one question, if I may.
Yes, ma'am.
There is that praxis, the training on the, we have the visitors coming in for it was June 7th, right? And we haven't heard from a couple of board members. We've heard from a couple that you can't attend. I believe we still need to know is it from Ms. Noble and Mr. Garcia, whether you might be attending just for planning? That was, remember we were bringing we were just fortunate to have the
PAX people, yeah.
the CEO from PAX, and that's going to be here, and then we're going to do a special community meeting on June 7th. Yes. Okay. And Mr. Garcia?
June 7th.
And what time was that missing?
5th. That's
5:30?
And are they coming just for us?
No, they're going to be here anyway, but we wanted to invite you.
Because this happened last week for my work, I may not be able to come. They're making it so there's something I may have to be at.
And just for board members, remember the law conference starts the next day. So that's unfortunately why I'm not coming. I'm going up to the law conference.
You mean going down to the law conference? Toward the equators.
Everything is.
All right. Okay. So anything else for, we're good on the 20th, right? And then for the PAX training, Rudy, are you going to be able to attend?
I don't have anything on my calendar, I believe. Sure, I can come.
Okay. That'd be great.
They're going to be here, right? Okay. At BFU. That's the 7th. At what time? At what time?
5:30.
Okay. So nothing else on advance? Nothing else on board discussion? We're adjourned.